In 1974, two psychologists at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem asked people to spin a wheel of fortune, a simple device that stopped at either 10 or 65. The number was random. Participants knew it was random. Then the researchers asked, what percentage of African countries are in the United Nations? People who spun 65 guessed, on average, 45%. People who spun 10 guessed, on average, 25%. A random number had moved their estimates by 20 percentage points. The researchers were Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. The phenomenon they had just demonstrated would eventually help earn a Nobel Prize. They called it the anchoring effect. The principle is deceptively simple. When people make estimates or decisions, they are disproportionately influenced by the first piece of numerical information they encounter, even when that number is completely irrelevant, randomly generated, or obviously wrong. The first number becomes an anchor, and all subsequent thinking is an adjustment from that anchor. The problem is that adjustments are almost always insufficient. You move from the anchor, but you don't move far enough. What makes anchoring so dangerous is its universality. Kahneman and Tversky's original study used random wheels of fortune. Subsequent researchers tried to break the effect. They told participants the anchor number was random. They offered cash incentives for accuracy. They recruited expert professionals, judges, real estate agents, doctors, instead of ordinary college students. In virtually every condition, the anchor held. Knowledge, expertise, and awareness of the bias do not protect you from it. A particularly disturbing demonstration came from a study of German judges. Researchers gave experienced legal professionals, people whose job is to evaluate evidence rationally and arrive at proportionate sentences, a case file for a shoplifting offense. Before sentencing, each judge was asked to roll a die that was secretly loaded to show either 3 or 9. Then they were asked to give a sentence. Judges who rolled 9 gave sentences averaging 8 months. Judges who rolled 3 gave sentences averaging 5 months. A loaded die was determining prison terms. To understand why anchoring is so powerful, you need to understand how human brains actually generate estimates. When faced with an uncertain question, your brain doesn't calculate. It doesn't systematically evaluate evidence and arrive at a conclusion through logic. It starts somewhere, typically the first relevant number it has encountered, and then makes adjustments. Cognitive scientists call this anchoring and adjustment. The adjustment is the problem. It requires active, effortful thinking. And effort is something brains are wired to minimize. Neuroscientist Adam Galinsky at Columbia Business School has shown that anchors work because they selectively activate anchor-consistent information in memory. If your anchor is high, your brain spontaneously retrieves reasons that support a high value. If it's low, the opposite happens. The anchor doesn't just give you a starting point, it determines what evidence you consider relevant. It literally filters your thinking before you even begin to think consciously. Nowhere is anchoring more deliberately weaponized than in pricing. The retail practice of showing a was price before a now price is pure anchoring. The original price, often inflated specifically to create a high anchor, makes the sale price feel like a bargain even when it isn't. Studies in the Journal of Consumer Research have shown that people will pay more for an item shown with a crossed-out high price than for the same item shown at the lower price alone. The phantom number changes the perceived value of the real one. Luxury retail takes anchoring to another level. High-end stores deliberately place their most expensive items prominently at the entrance, not because they expect to sell many of them, but because those prices recalibrate what customers consider expensive. After you've seen a $15,000 watch, a $2,000 watch feels almost reasonable. Automotive dealers use the same technique, showing buyers a fully loaded premium trim first, making the base model feel like a sensible compromise even though the base model was the actual target sale all along. Salary negotiation is one of the highest stakes arenas where anchoring plays out. Meta-analysis of negotiation research consistently shows that the party who makes the first offer has a systematic advantage, because that offer becomes the anchor around which the entire negotiation revolves. A 2006 study by Adam Galinsky found that first offers explained 85% of the variance in final settlement prices in negotiation experiments. The person who opens the negotiation is largely determining its outcome. This is why salary negotiation coaches universally advise candidates to name a number first, to make it high, and to be specific rather than round. Specificity matters because specific numbers suggest precision, they imply research. A salary request of $87,500 feels more calculated than $90,000, even though it's lower. Research by Malia Mason at Columbia confirms that precise anchors lead to final settlements closer to the anchor than round numbers do. The psychology of specificity strengthens the anchor's pull. Real estate is an industry that runs on anchoring. The listing price of a home functions as the anchor that structures every subsequent perception of value. Studies in the Journal of Real Estate Finance and Economics showed that when listing prices were artificially inflated by 10 to 12%, actual sale prices also rose, even when professional appraisers and experienced agents reviewed the properties. The experts were not immune. The anchor moved the professionals just as it moved laypersons. Charity fundraising is another domain where anchors are precisely calibrated. A study by Yuri Simonson and George Lowenstein found that when donation request forms suggested specific amounts, say, $50, $100, or $250, donors gave more than when forms had blank fields. But the specific amounts shown changed the distribution of donations. Show high suggested amounts and the average donation rises. The charity isn't describing what's appropriate. It's setting an anchor to determine what you think is appropriate. Medical decision-making is an arena where anchoring has life or death consequences. Research published in Medical Decision-Making found that physicians' diagnostic judgments are influenced by the order in which symptoms and test results are presented. The first diagnosis considered tends to anchor subsequent reasoning, making physicians less likely to update their assessment even in the face of contradictory evidence. This is called diagnostic anchoring, and it is a recognized source of medical error. In legal contexts beyond sentencing, anchoring shapes jury decisions about damages. Research by psychologists Gretchen Chapman and Brian Bornstein found that the larger the damages number mentioned by plaintiffs' attorneys, even when those numbers were described as not representative of appropriate damages, the larger the jury awards. A study with mock jurors showed that mentioning an absurdly high number like $1 billion still produced higher awards than a control condition. The number was absurd. The anchoring was not. The minimum payment feature on credit card statements is one of the most consequential anchors in personal finance. When credit card statements list a minimum payment amount, say, $25, this becomes an anchor for how much people pay. A 2008 study by Neil Stewart found that people who saw a minimum payment figure paid significantly less toward their balance than people who saw no minimum amount. The minimum payment doesn't represent the optimal payment. It anchors people to a number that maximizes interest accrued and therefore maximizes profit for the card issuer. Even time estimates are subject to anchoring. Project managers routinely underestimate completion time when asked to start from a specific optimistic anchor. Software engineers asked, "Could this be done in a week?" give shorter estimates than those asked to estimate freely. Research by Roger Buehler at Wilfrid Laurier University on the planning fallacy shows that anchoring on best-case scenarios is a primary driver of chronic project delays across industries. Your project is late before it starts because the anchor was wrong from day one. Online reviews provide ambient anchors that shape product perception before purchase. A product with an average 4.2-star rating and 5,000 reviews anchors your expectations in a specific way. Research in the Journal of Marketing showed that the number shown first, the aggregate star rating, dominates subsequent evaluation even when people read individual reviews that don't support it. The anchor is so powerful that people rate their own product experiences higher after purchasing highly rated items, regardless of actual quality. Political framing relies heavily on numerical anchors. When pollsters ask, should the government spend $5 billion on Program X, they get different responses than when they ask, should the government cut $5 billion from Program X? Even when the underlying policy is identical. The number framed as a spend feels like a loss from a zero anchor. The cut feels like a loss from a higher baseline. Policy support swings by double-digit percentages based purely on how the anchor is framed. Wine is a classic anchoring domain. In a 2008 study by Plasman, O'Doherty, and Rangel, participants tasted wines that were presented as either expensive or cheap, the same wine given different price labels. Using fMRI, researchers found that the medial orbitofrontal cortex, associated with experienced pleasantness, showed greater activation when participants thought they were drinking expensive wine. The anchor didn't just change what people said they liked. It changed how their brain processed the actual sensory experience. The price anchor literally changed the taste. Can you protect yourself from anchoring? Research suggests some partially effective strategies. Considering the opposite, actively thinking about why the anchor might be wrong, reduces but does not eliminate the effect. Generating your own independent estimate before seeing any anchor is more protective, but requires discipline and prior knowledge. Sleeping on decisions before committing forces temporal separation from the anchor's peak influence. None of these are foolproof. The brain's anchor dependency appears to be architectural. In negotiations specifically, preparation helps most. If you walk in knowing your own research-backed valuation, the counterparty's anchor has less room to move you. But knowing your value doesn't make you immune, it makes you more resistant. There is a difference. Studies consistently show that even people who recognize anchoring happening in real time still move toward the anchor. The knowledge that a trap exists does not prevent you from falling into it. The most uncomfortable truth about anchoring is not that we are occasionally misled by irrelevant numbers. It is that our entire concept of value, what something is worth, what a fair price is, what a proportionate punishment looks like, is not calculated from first principles. It is always a starting point plus adjustment. And the starting point is almost always set by someone else. The question is not whether you're being anchored. The question is who is choosing your anchor, and what they gain by doing so. Kahneman spent his career documenting the gap between how humans think they reason and how they actually reason. Anchoring was one of his first and most durable discoveries. Over 50 years of subsequent research has only confirmed and extended his original finding. We are not rational agents making free decisions in a neutral information environment. We are anchor-seeking creatures, perpetually calibrating our sense of the world against the last number someone put in front of us. And most of the time, we have no idea it's happening.